folks, welcome back to another episode of the Guitar Cast. This week I am beyond excited and literally sitting beside myself because I have Fingerstyle royalty with me today. And
Where?
Oh, I truly mean that. Ladies and gentlemen, I have Mr. Michael Fix with me here today. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks
coming
for the
on
invite.
the show. As I said, I'm beside myself and you need no introduction.
But you gave me one anyway.
But I will give you a further introduction. Folks, Michael is renowned as one of the finest fingerstyle guitar players on the planet. You have won 3 golden guitars, released 16 studio albums.
22 actually.
22, right, 22.
I must update my bio.
22 studio albums.
Yeah.
You have over 1,200 published works. You have toured the world and played at some of the biggest guitar festivals and shared the stage with the best, Albert Lee, Martin Taylor, Tommy Emmanuel, and Joe Robinson. Even last night, we saw the great Brendan Radford and also the new young gun,
Marcus
Church. It was fantastic to see. You've written for TV shows in Australia.
Yeah, still a big part of what I do is production music, which is music that that can be used in film trailers, it can be used in film scenes, it can be used in advertising, background of TV shows. Something I've been involved with for quite a long time now.
Fantastic. And we kind of have something in common. I'm from Mackay, and you spent from 1991 to 1995 playing with Graham Connors.
Yeah, that's
the lead
right.
guitar player.
Yeah, fantastic singer-songwriter. And he had a big part in setting me up as a solo performer. Because in the late 80s, I guess from right through the 80s, I was sort of started developing a solo guitar repertoire. I got very interested in fingerstyle and the concept of performing solo. And so much of the 80s was spent building a repertoire. And playing with Graham, I was playing electric guitar and some acoustic. I was a sideman, but I'd released, in 91, I'd released my first album, and Graham gave me the opportunity to perform a track. So I would open the second set with a solo guitar piece, which was the most incredible experience to be sort of thrown right into that. Most people would sort of play in the background in a restaurant and then move on to playing in the corner of a bar or something like that.
Right.
But this was like straight into a concert scenario with a listening audience and all that entails. It was a steep learning curve, and it was my first opportunity to really present my own music in such a setting. So it was a really important time.
So you are from Wollongong and you started playing guitar at age 12, and you had a very interesting guitar upbringing. You were taught by and mentored by Tommy Emmanuel.
Yeah.
Can you describe the experience of being mentored by Tommy?
Okay, yeah.
As it would be a bit of a different learning experience than
I'll go back a little before that,
Sure.
because I actually had a guitar teacher in my teen years.
Right.
My parents bought me a guitar when I was 11 and sent me to lessons. And there was a guy called Alan Phillips, and he had this little studio above a shop and called it the Phillips Guitar Academy. Right. And he was the most fantastic teacher, because from day one, I started working from a book, which was the good old Mel Bay guitar method.
Yep.
So I learned to read, and the fingerboard was unlocked piece by piece in a nice, logical fashion. Of course, when you're young, you absorb that stuff much quicker. So I learned the notes. I learned scales and keys and the chords that belong to them and all that kind of stuff. And by sort of age 16, I was kind of playing in semi-pro bands. And so the thing that led to the connection with Tommy was growing up in Wollongong, playing, 4, sometimes 5 nights a week and still going to school and all that. To me, it was like the most obvious thing was I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to be a guitar player. That's my career, So to see what was beyond the horizon, I started to travel to Sydney whenever I could, and there was a place which was like a mecca. It was called the Musicians Club. It was the perfect name for it, and that's where I saw Tommy play. He was with a group called the Doug Parkinson and the Southern Star Band. Yep. A couple of things happened. First was Tommy playing electric guitar. I'd never seen him before or had never met him. there's a guy with a Telecaster and there's stuff coming out. It's like, geez, this is amazing. This kind of like pop rock music, but I can hear these jazz lines and I can hear some really interesting stuff that was fresh and new for my ear. And then in the break, he comes back out on stage by himself with an Ovation acoustic guitar, sits on a stool and plays a Beatles medley. That was the tune. I remember he played here, there, and everywhere. So I'm listening, going, wow, I'd never seen a solo guitar except for classical guitar, and I loved the Beatles. And here's this guy playing Beatles, and the whole audience is entranced and huge applause, and it was like, bingo, that's what I want to do.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, I had to meet him and introduce myself. I think I was a lot more confident and cocky in those days.
Right.
I didn't have any qualms about, hi, Tommy, my name's Michael, and I'd love to learn some of the stuff you're playing. And he didn't commit at first, but I kept coming back. And he saw I was really serious about it. And he said, all right, why don't you come over to my place? And we set a time and we got together. And it wasn't so much lessons as such. He's not a formal teacher.
Yes.
It was immediately like an older brother or mentor role.
Right.
And on the first day, we're just chatting. And he said, have you ever heard of any music by Chet Atkins? I said, no, I don't think so. I don't know who Chet is. So he puts a vinyl on. And the first thing I hear is the first track he played me. So I'm listening to this, and I said, are there two guitarists there? No.
It's a recording trick.
Yeah, I can hear bass, I can hear melody. It sounds like two different players. Because we didn't have YouTube in those days. But I had the even better thing. I had the live player in front of me. He said, no, he grabbed a guitar and he said, this is what he's doing. And I'm like, really? And when I first arrived there, my plan was like, well, okay, what do I want to learn? I want to learn some of those cool rock and roll licks that he was playing. You know? But that immediately went out the window. And I said, can you show me that?
Yeah.
Can you show me how to do that? And that started the rest of my life, really. Right. Sort of the door opened there and the light came on. And
I think every fingerstyle guitar player that I've spoken to has that moment, even now after we know that it wasn't a recording trick, as a lot of people were speculating about Chet.
Yeah.
Is that I can do three things at once. I know for me, as I mentioned to you before I started playing fingerstyle, I was strictly Metallica and Satriani, and then by chance at a barbecue, the person's son was playing a Day Tripper arrangement.
Yeah.
And I just went, hang on, do that again. How are you? And that was it.
Yeah.
That hooked me. Same thing. I'm like, I don't want to learn Metallica anymore. I want to learn how to play fingerstyle.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you talking about that moment of him playing Chet and then talking about how's he doing that and then seeing him play.
Yeah. And the deeper I got into it and the more I discovered the music of Chet, I realized what a great fit it was for my own thing in terms of all the musical styles, because Chet covered everything. He played classical, he played jazz, he played Latin American, he played pop tunes and Beatles and all that stuff. And looking back at it, it's one of the reasons why it really connected. At first, it was just something brand new and tunes and repertoire that was unfamiliar to me, which was the American Merle Travis, coming out of that era, some of the traditional songs that Chet had arranged for guitar. That was new for my ear. But then as I dug deeper and discovered all his albums, of which he had about 100 in his life, he was doing everything. And it was almost like, well, anything goes. And the more I can develop this technique, the more possibilities I have to express myself in lots of different styles.
Going back through your discography, I noticed even on your first album, Tantalize, track Here We Go, and then Jerry's Breakfast, you have two completely...
Jerry's Breakdown.
Jerry, I'm so sorry, Jerry's Breakdown. I haven't had breakfast this
Which
morning.
he recorded after breakfast.
After breakfast. I'm so sorry. It's Jerry's Breakdown. You have like a chicken pick and hoedown kind of piece. You just said you've always been influenced by other styles of music.
Yeah.
But have you always tried to bring that to solo fingerstyle? Because
I have. I've been more considered about it in later years. In the early years, I considered it a bit of a problem because I knew that I had a kind of a low boredom threshold. And, as a teenager, well, for me, it was like singer-songwriters of the early 70s. But I was also listening to Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin, and that was, really turning me on. And then I dabbled in some classical guitar, and then, I heard other sounds. It was all guitar. It seemed that in the 1970s, which was my kind of formative period that really created my musical taste, I guess, as a teenager, everything had guitar in it. And the top 40, you put the radio on, and which was our main source of music at that time. The top 40 included everything. It was pop music, meaning popular. And so you would hear Fire and Rain by James Taylor, then you'd hear Black Knight by Deep Purple, and then you'd hear the Kingston Trio, and then you'd hear, it's just such a range and variety of music that for me as a young guitar player I just loved it all. Anything that had a guitar in it, I was into, and I was trying to work it out. So when it came time to kind of form my own path, as I mentioned, sessions was really interesting for me because my logic was, I love all these styles of music, and I can read music, and I can play a bit of. Somebody says, can you play a bit of Spanish guitar or on the nylon string, or can you play a bit of heavy rock or whatever? Yeah. I've dabbled in all those things, but the acoustic guitar solo thing sort of set me on a thought process of, well, what do I focus on? And it worried me that I couldn't label myself as I'm a blues guitarist or I'm a jazz guitarist or whatever. And I thought it was a problem. After a while, I realized, all these styles form who I am, and it percolates and it comes out as something that is hopefully is original, and I don't have to really describe it or make it fit a genre.
I think that's fantastic and very fresh sounding. For fingerstyle in 2024, most of the time people seeing on YouTube is usually fingerstyle being played solo. Off your Web of Dreams album, you have a track, Footprints in My Heart.
Mm-hmm.
Without the backing, it's a beautiful ballad fingerstyle, but the backing you put to that is something reminiscent of Miles Davis kind of blue, like a jazz type of backing.
That comes from my interest in recording and production, which I've been involved with for nearly as long as I've been playing guitar. Yep. So even my early teens, I was recording myself and listening to myself through headphones, and I remember building from an electronics magazine kit, a reverb unit, a spring reverb unit, and just and just hearing the sounds and listening to albums with headphones on and all that sort of thing. So production has been of enormous interest to me, and I've always self-produced. I learned fairly early on how to split myself into 3 different roles: a performer, an engineer, and a producer. And with most of my solo tracks, and it varies from album to album, I'm always trying different things out, but I would record my performances as a solo performer, and then let that sit for a while, and then come back and put my producer's hat on and sort of listen to it and go, what should I do with not just with the album, but with individual songs? And I've kind of varied from album to album how much additional instrumentation I'll put on there. I guess like everyone, you sort of think about your audience and you think, well, what do they expect and what would they like? And you're always second guessing. So my answer to that is, well, what do I like? How would I like to hear this song? I sort of hear this as, it'd be nice with a bit of flugelhorn on there or some acoustic bass or whatever it is. And I've always considered it, and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong here. Everyone has a different opinion. I've always thought for a listener to engage a listener with say 45 minutes of instrumental original music, it's a pretty big ask, and a solo instrument as well. So I've always been inclined to add some stuff just for interest's sake, just so it doesn't get too samey all the way. And a solo acoustic guitar, it's yes, you've got your hardcore enthusiasts, and that's all they want to hear. But I've always tried to reach a broader audience, and I've, in the back of my mind, I've been aware of, maybe I can get some airplay with something, particularly if it's a little more produced. And tracks have turned up. I've never had a top 40 song or anything like that, but tracks were being used in film and television off my albums, and that sort of worked together with my sort of production music thing, but kind of reaffirmed that there was a sound there that was appealing.
I think it gives a completely different take on the song when I hear, like I was saying before, Footprints in My Heart, and then even something like Where Are You Now?
Mm-hmm.
Has that been in a TV show before?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right.
See if I can remember it. It's a long time ago. That's the one you mean, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask, is there a lyric, Where Are You Now, to that melody?
Yeah, definitely.
Because when I heard it, I was like, does that... Because it's so singable, but when I hear that with the backing you've put to that, I go, yeah, like as a solo piece, it works, but in a context that could be with film or TV, it enables it to be there. So
yeah, to be honest, I can't remember how I originally recorded it,
right.
what backing I used.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the Guitar Spectacular. So that's been going for quite a number of years now.
Yeah,
you've had the latest one I saw last night, which was brilliant. You had Marcus Church and Brendan Bradford on there, but in the past you've had Adam Rafferty on there as well. When did the concept for that come about for you to put together?
The inspiration for that was some tours that I did in Germany. My albums are distributed by a company called Acoustic Music Records, headed by a fella called Peter Finger.
Yep.
Perfect name for a guitar player.
That's brilliant.
He's like the figure in the acoustic guitar scene in Germany. He's built a whole empire on acoustic guitar. He's got the record label, publishing label, distribution network. He himself is an incredible guitarist. He sells print music, and he does these annual tours called International Guitar Night. And they're basically promoting the artists that are on his label, and he would be himself plus 3 guests, and they would tour. And I was involved in a few of those tours, and a couple of things about them that I particularly enjoyed was the interaction between players, the potential for what could happen.
Right.
He would have often a classical guitarist and somebody who was some young guy doing the tapping thing, and Peter, who plays in his own bespoke open tuning and plays this very dense, almost orchestral stuff, and me doing my sort of vaguely Chet thing, and how this could combine. And often it was pretty hard work, actually, because classical guitarists typically don't improvise. Yeah. Say, do you know blah, 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 and key a D? Yeah. So have you got the music?
Exactly.
So I sort of enjoyed that aspect of it. And the other thing was that it wasn't called Peter and Friends or what, it was called the International Guitar Night. And it had built up a reputation, and people would go to the shows who had no idea who the other players were. And we're talking about the audience here. And I'd speak to them and say, Peter, he always brings interesting people. I come to all these concerts. And I realized... to have an event, to have a name could work really well because myself, like many people, just struggling to get gigs off the ground, and as an indie artist, having to sell yourself constantly is hard work, And I found if I had a theme, a title, I could sell that. I didn't feel like I was bragging about me. It'd be about the guests and the concept. Yes. So I started this in probably about 15 or 16 years ago. And I was arranging the tours myself, which was hard work, but I got things off the ground. Yeah. And it was partly because I had a couple of guests and I could sell the idea. You're getting 3 guests and these are great players, and one guy's coming over from Italy and blah, blah, blah. And so the concept grew, and now I think I've reached that sort of point too, like Peter did, where people automatically come to the Acoustic Guitar Spectacular because they know the show, they know, they trust me. I'm going to bring someone interesting along. It was great pre-pandemic, was getting some government support,
Right.
touring funding and all that sort of thing. So we had the budgets to bring out international players, hence Adam Rafferty, Andrea Valeri, Zenka Meinen, Luca Stricagnoli, and it was possible for them to come out. The visas would be covered, the airfares were taken care of, and all that sort of thing. That funding isn't really available anymore. There is some small amount of funding, because these tours are quite expensive to put on, as you can imagine. So currently it's Queensland artists, and that's the show you saw last night. It has been the last couple of years.
Well, it's brilliant. I mean, I got to see the new young gun.
Yeah,
Marcus
Church, he's phenomenal. Yeah,
Brendan Radford, who's very
old gun.
Yeah,
older gun.
Very well known in the country scene as a session player, but great solo player as well. Great singer too. I didn't know.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And yourself, phenomenal as well. So, and then all three of you playing at the end was amazing to see three different flavors come together, but really gel.
Yeah, and this show and last year was similar. The whole second half was the three of us on stage, and that doesn't always work, you know. Sometimes you can get three people who are so different that you spend a lot of time to work up two or three numbers to conclude the night. But with Marcus and Brendan, it was let's just go on stage, the three of us. It'll be a bit of a jam, but there's a few set pieces.
No, it's absolutely fantastic. So, speaking of playing, so improvising, something that's very much a part of your playing when you're soloing on stage. How do you think about improvising? I've asked every guitar player this same question because I love hearing everyone's take on it.
I just make it up as I go along.
Make it up, that's it. So, just something of like a D minor or an A minor.
Yeah,
soloing.
I know my scales, but I tend to think more about chords than scales.
About chords?
Because, and the reason is chords were my entry point into the guitar. So the first thing I learned most in the first sort of year of playing were chords. And it was, we talked about the visual aspect of shapes on guitar. So my fingers were already making shapes, which became the points of improvising. Right. I would occasionally see a live concert on TV, and there'd be a guitarist, and I'd be amazed how they're moving their hands up the neck, playing solos. And I of course, I was a beginner, and I knew the C chord, and I'd learned that shape as well. And I'm trying to figure out what are they doing, and it seemed logical. If I'm going to play a solo over a C chord, and I've got those notes, okay? How can, and at some point it occurred to me, well, they're moving their hands up the neck, so they're not just jumping, they're kind of, there's this thing happening. Yeah. So how can I connect that shape to that shape? And a lot of this was sort of just trial and error. I sort of went, I want to get from there, jump up to there, and jump up to there. So, oh, that'll work. What if I use that note?
Yeah.
Oh. Wow, that unlocked a whole thing of getting from the C chord notes there to the C chord notes there just by a convenient slide up that took me to that position. And that was the beginning of that process. And then somewhere along the line, of course, I learned the blues scale, and then combined, threw that into it as well. But my initial thing was learning inversions of chords and figuring out how I can link these shapes. Yeah. And it was usually sort of a chromatic thing. I could get from this position to that position by a chromatic run. And I had the option, do I want to stay up there, in which case I would just flip my hand down to there.
Yep.
And I'd invent, when I discovered these things, I'd keep a notebook, and I would try to give them a name or something to help me remember the idea, and make it a shortcut that I could easily remember. So at some point I realized it sounds cool if I've got this C shape here, if I went and did like a semitone,
Oh, wow.
and it was, I make a semitone from a semitone below, go into any chord shape from a semitone below. And it doubles the number of notes that you've got. So, I'd sort of incorporate, and it immediately sounds jazzy.
Oh, it's so cool.
Instead of doing that C arpeggio, you got a jazz lick.
Yeah.
So write down jazz lick, tick.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, what if I go a semitone above? That sounds a little bit bizarre, but you find ways of, they become connecting notes. So you might not want to use that in a C chord.
Yeah.
But as a passing or going up.
Yeah.
That actually works. It doesn't sound like a wrong note if it's on the way,
Yeah.
But if you land on it, that sounds wrong.
Yeah.
Trial and error.
Yeah, resolving. That's a brilliant way of thinking about. I've never thought, especially never taught with improvising, going off chord shapes, especially off C. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because it's, excuse me for saying, it's a bit of a duh moment for me, like, why not?
Oh, okay.
I mean it. Like that will probably change the way I think about improvising now. Because I was just thrown scales as a student, which, just historian, here's Ionian, and I learnt that, but never. And I think because guitar, there is so much going on, when you do learn improvising, less is better when you've got less to think about. So, for example, taking that C shape and going like that, and then adding that, that's awesome.
Yeah, but I can sort of look at the fingerboard, and without putting my hands there, if you say D minor, I can see, like on a page when you had the little dot chord diagrams, I can see where my fingers are can go to make the D minor shape.
Yeah.
And if I was soloing, I'd straight away go to this kind of those shapes. And I wouldn't necessarily play arpeggios, but they're my key notes, and then it's just how do I land on them or go into them to create something interesting and spontaneous.
Yep. Thank you for sharing. I ask every guitar player how they think about improvising, because I do know every guitar player has their thing. And when I was learning jazz, I had to find my thing. And Jamie Clark spoke quite a lot about, does this work for me? And when he's teaching, finding what works for students. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, that's okay. It's kind of, it is a little bit genre specific too, I think. If you're a blues guitarist, the blues scale and the variations on it are the obvious and logical place to start. But a lot of the tunes that I was learning, they weren't necessarily blues progressions. They would be either diatonic progressions, or say something like that piece Liebestrom, that Chet piece that I first learned. It goes from C to E7. Now you can't, and then it goes up a fourth. You're on A7 and up another fourth. So you're moving in and out of keys. So you can't use a scale. The blues scale's not going to work in this setting, nor will just a C scale, because you're non-diatonic. So I had to think, well, how do I negotiate these chord changes? And it became the chord shapes. There's the C triad, there's the E7 triad, there's the A7. So they're all in the vicinity, and I just had to remember not to play a wrong note, landing on a wrong triad note or whatever. So it was an appropriate way to visualize handling those chord changes.
That's brilliant.
singer-songwriter and try to play very melodic phrases that I'm singing in my head.
The improvising was so singable that you just did it, but there was so much technique and so much variety of styles in there. So
thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
I don't consider myself like a shredder as such. It's very much a reaction to what it is. But that's the session guy thing, We're going to play something tasteful and nice that's appropriate to the chords.
I think as guitar players and even listeners in general, we're always still attracted to the singable solos, like The Sweet Child of Mine, Hotel California, where we can hum that. I love the shred, but I still do love, Brick in the Wall. The opening lines of that is just still
or anything George Harrison.
Yeah. I mean, it's memorable. So for a young fingerstyle guitar player, I think myself, hindsight sees everything now and goes, I would go and learn it like this because I would get there quicker. What would your advice be to someone starting out, trying to put the multi-part thing together? What would your advice be to how to get there the most efficient way possible?
Listen to the masters.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I will still go back and listen to Chet Atkins recordings, even though I sort of see it as a critical part of my life nearly 40 years ago. It doesn't mean I've moved on from there. I still recalibrate by listening to Chet, and I still quite regularly I'll relearn stuff because there'll be a tune that I've sort of totally forgotten about that I used to play 40 years ago, and I hear it and I remember learning that, and in my mind I can still play it, but then I'm listening to Chet and I'm going, I've been playing it wrong. I didn't learn it. I can hear now that there are different. He's in a different position, or there's different bass note, or at that time we never saw Chet. It wasn't on YouTube. We didn't really see TV specials here like they did in America. So it wasn't until years later when YouTube was popular that I actually got to see Chet play and realized, all that stuff, the economy of motion, the effortless movement, what a thing that was. And so I went about relearning some of his pieces just for my own pleasure.
It's fascinating watching him play because he had the entertainer value there as well, which made it almost look a little bit, this is so easy.
So easy,
But, but it's not, isn't it? It is such a refined, complex thing that he was doing, which I imagine, in the days when he first started doing that must have just bewildered people.
Yeah, and there's no shortcut to that. That comes due to repetition, and more repetition until you can do it in your sleep. And then when you get up and people go, it makes it look so easy. Well, it's because you spent hours and hours and hours and sacrificed most of your life.
Absolutely, yeah. Can you talk about your practice regime when you were younger and how much sort of contact time you had on the guitar?
Oh, yeah. Look, as a teenager still going to school, I couldn't wait to get home from school to pick up the guitar. That was homework. It was always like a real dilemma. What am I going to do first? Should I do the homework and reward myself by playing guitar, or just get in the guitar first and get the good stuff out of the way? Then later on, when I moved to Sydney, so I was aged between about the age of 20 to 24. When I was a single guy living on my own, I practiced sort of 12 to 15 hours a day, and I could do it without pain and with a feeling of I'm learning the whole time.
Right.
And I put myself, I'm surprised I don't have a lot worse back problems because I put myself into, as we've all done, sort of leaning over the guitar and leaning over to the needle on the record player and hunched over all the time. But I could do that for hours. I had 2 gigs a week playing in a club, and that was all the money I needed to pay the rent and the petrol and the food. And the rest was just practice.
That's amazing.
And I was living around the corner from Tommy, so I had that inspiration on tap all the time. So I'd be driving him to sessions and gigs, and he would be constantly stimulating me in terms of. I remember trips where we'd go across town to some studio, and he'd sit in the back seat playing. and he'd be testing me. He'd say, "What chord is this?" And I'd be, and like playing this game all the way.
Awesome. Yeah. On that, I noticed in all of your recordings, you have a very accurate rhythm sense, but also your right hand, you have such a light touch, but it projects so well. One of the things, and this is getting fingerstyle nerdy here, but one of the things I struggle with and have to consistently remind myself of, especially with a thumb pick, is that my thumb, if I don't practice for a while, will always overpower my bottom fingers. Was that something you consciously worked on? Or
Yes, I did, yeah. In the early days, it was certainly a similar problem that I was experiencing. I had Tommy there as a regulator. He would point it out all the time, and it was usually not so much that the thumb was too loud, it was the fingers were too weak.
Right.
And I remember him saying to me, "Look, you've got this box. It sounds like the sound is being trapped in there. You've got to bring it out, And that image worked well for me. And part of it was building up the calluses on my fingertips. I'm not using fingernails, so I'm build calluses up just like you do on your left hand. Calluses come up on the right hand, and when those calluses are firm, the sound is solid.
Yes.
And I worked on just listening to myself. With a thumb pick, you've got it's quite thick. It's not quite a millimeter thick, but it still doesn't have much flex in it.
Yep.
And that sound is very strong.
Yep.
So I try and make my fingers the same.
Right.
And use all the fingers, even my fourth finger. And I would work on, even though it hurt, but once the calluses were formed, the pain was a good pain.
Yeah.
They kind of they harden up, and when I'm playing a real lot, they burn a little bit, and I like that feeling.
Yep. Working hard.
Yeah, exactly. But the other thing too that was really crucial to learn, and this wasn't anything that I was taught. It sort of came as a byproduct of learning the Chet Atkins style, which has that muted bass.
Yes.
And part of that technique of having the bass muted is control. You're controlling the volume of the note, but also the length of the note.
Yep.
The thumb pick gives you an attack on the beginning of the note. And the amount of mute is controlled by the palm of your hand and where it's positioned in relation to the saddle.
Yep.
And it's very, very subtle, but even when I'm playing almost completely open, the pad of my hand is still hovering just ever so slightly there, ready to just bring down the level of the bass or reduce the sustain of the bass note. And when you sort of extrapolate that, this movement here, this becomes like your mixer.
Yeah.
It's controlling the amount of bass and the amount of percussion and the volume. So if I slowly slide my hand down, you'll hear how the bass decreases and the percussion increases.
Yeah.
So now we've got no bass and all percussion. So you're looking for the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Where there's enough of bass note, and then when you add and listening to where the relative volume is of the melody notes versus the bass notes, and just controlling the right hand.
Yep.
That's where all the action is.
Yep. That is awesome. I've been wanting to ask someone for a long time, am I the only one with this thumb problem? Does everyone else just like, no, of course, didn't you know? So that's awesome. Thank you so much for
you're welcome.
For sharing that. Yeah. And do you think listening back, I remember James Sherlock telling me, if you want to get better, record yourself as much as you can.
Yes.
And you listen back,
absolutely.
And that's when you hear the gremlins and the nasties. So
yeah. That was another great moment that I remember from those early sessions with Tommy. he would lend me his Chet Atkins albums. I had a
Right.
stack of them, and I'd go back to my little flat, and I was living alone at the time, which was
Yeah.
fortuitous.
Yep.
Didn't have to drive anyone crazy, and just
Yeah.
listen and play along over and over and over again. So I remember he taught me this tune, Liebestraum, and the reason it was a good one to learn was that the melody is very static.
Yes.
And the melody falls neatly under the hands. You don't
Yeah.
have to do any fancy moves or stretches to, they're all there. Here's the D7, the melody is still there. Here's the F,
Yep.
the G. So they were all familiar chord shapes, and the melody, it wasn't too busy.
Yeah.
So I learnt this piece, and I played it for Tommy, and he just sort of went, yeah, good, okay. Wasn't very excited, and
Right.
and by that stage I knew him well enough to say, you know what, your response is pretty much the same response I'm getting for anyone I play this to. I know I'm playing it right. I'm not playing any mistakes, and he just said, record yourself and then listen to Chet, listen to his recording, and see if you can figure out what the difference is.
Oh, wow.
And it was so obvious. It was the groove.
Right.
Mine was perfectly, it was perfectly accurate.
Yeah.
But Chet's had this, the syncopation was in there, and the thumb was really grooving.
Oh, yeah.
All those differences, it became glaringly obvious, what he was saying.
I noticed, especially on the Rewind and Something's Cooking album, it sounds, and I could be wrong, but it sounds like you're extremely present in what you're playing, and that you're very much connected to what you're playing on the record.
Oh, thank you.
And Jamie Clark and I were talking about this also, that there's very few players around that can block out the world and just go, okay, I have to play, whether it be at a gig, on a recording, because life is happening to us when we have to show up and work. So
I tell you something, I have no problem blocking out external stuff, but I have the noise comes from within, and that's what I struggle with. And as I talk to other players, it seems to be a universal thing, the voices that interrupt your flow, that tell you that you've just made a clanger and everyone's going to hate you, and the internal dialogue, the mental game. You mentioned about breathing. You'll see I have breathe written on my guitar.
That's amazing.
It's as a reminder.
Yeah.
And because it is that thing of wanting to be present and be there and be in that moment, and part of that is allowing yourself to, breathe deeply and get oxygen into your flowing around your brain and all that sort of thing, rather than the opposite, which is when you start to feel a bit of nerves or anxiety, you start breathing fast, and it's very shallow breathing, and it feels, I don't know if there's any truth in this. I'm not a doctor, but I was always led to believe that for the body, particularly the brain, to get full oxygen, you need to breathe deeply. And if you have this shallow breathing just from the top of your lungs, you're not getting the oxygen supply, and you start to get a little dizzy and sweaty and nervous and shaky. And, these are all the side effects of that.
I'd like to ask you about your work with charity. You've done some work with Variety clubs.
Yeah. That was a while back now. The Variety Club of Australia, they used to, maybe they still do. I'm not really sure if it's a thing. They had this thing called a bush bash.
Okay.
And I know there are variations on that theme. Brendan Radford is involved in something like that, where you get an old car and you basically fit it out for a rally.
Right.
But in the Variety Club bash, they were specifically old cars, from 50s and 60s, maybe the 70s. And they would have, it was basically an excuse for a bunch of guys to have a lot of fun and do a rally across Australia and raise money for the Variety Club, raising money for kids.
Yeah.
I think it was kids in hospital or underprivileged kids. Right. And this was in the Graham Connors days. We were on tour. We were somewhere in Catherine or somewhere in the Northern Territory, and the Variety Club bash was coming through. And so, saw the cars and met some of the drivers, and they connected me with the Variety Club, and I put a tune together called Bush Bash, and they used it then on their promotional campaign. Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you again so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's just been an absolute privilege to sit here with you, and the knowledge you've shared with me and the rest of our audience today is, it's just inspiring. So can we hear you play a little bit more?
All right. Maybe I'll play something from the classical repertoire. We were talking about, my dabbling in classical music. I remember learning, as we probably all did.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So now, one of the things with classical music was I realized at the age of 15, when I was constantly being torn, I realized what a discipline it was, and it wasn't something you kind of improvised with and mucked around. So, I'm here listening to Richie Blackmore and, blues players and that, and thinking, I think I want to do that, but this is quite rigid.
Yes.
But later on, I thought, no, what the hell, have a bit of fun with the classics. So I recorded a bunch of things, including Bourrée, which I did like a swing.
That is amazing. Folks, Michael Fix, as I mentioned, is one of the finest fingerstyle guitar players on the planet. And mate, it's been an absolute privilege to sit here with you today.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Oh mate, that's very eye-opening. I learned a lot from you, and I hope our viewers have learned a lot from you. And had a great chance to talk to you about your incredible career. And mate, thank you so much once again. Yeah, absolute pleasure.
It was great. Good fun.
Folks, once again, Michael Fix has one last show of the Guitar Spectacular, and that is on
this Saturday. I forgot what the date is. August the 3rd, I think it is. Yeah, in Millmerran of all places. Yeah.
But folks, you can find Michael Fix on Instagram, online at his website, michaelfix.com, and also YouTube. You've got lots of great videos on YouTube, so highly encourage you go and follow Michael. And hopefully catch him at the next Guitar Spectacular or solo show as well. Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you.